Hey, somebody's got to clean their plate. You have? Excellent. Good morning, afternoon, or evening. You are listening to the Professional Noticer. Hello, everyone. I'm Andy Andrews. Hey, thank you for making me a part of your week. My purpose here today with every show we do is to play the part of a best friend or a coach. I want to help you live the life of your wildest dreams by giving you access to the greatest mentors the world has to offer today. Our sponsor this week is IAITAM.org. That's pronounced ITAM.org. Are you looking to earn a valuable, today-oriented degree? Check out ITAM.org, the only global training organization turning out IT asset managers that corporations immediately hire all over the world. They own and manage an accredited online program producing a degree that is actually in huge demand. So just go to IAITAM.org and look through their client list. You'll see everyone from Sony Pictures to NASA to the United Nations. Google is one of ITAM's clients. Yahoo, Facebook, Microsoft, Apple. These companies only hire the people that ITAM has trained because ITAM offers the only accredited degree in the field. That's ITAM.org, IAITAM.org. Observations and answers, that's what we do here on the Professional Noticer. And today, we are looking for some observations and some answers. We have, I think, fairly unusual guests today for the Professional Noticer. And I think you'll find out as we go along. Both of these people, this young lady and this young gentleman, work here at Wisdom Harbor Studios. And would like you to please welcome, you probably already are familiar with them, but please welcome little M, Emily Isbell, and Matt Jakubik.
Thank you for having us.
Glad you guys are here.
Excited.
Now, the topic of our conversation today is going to be unusual. It's the topic is parenting today's generation. What worked, what didn't, and why? And you guys are perfect for me to put on the rack here and torture the answers out of you because I know both of you well, and I know both sets of your parents. And so I know by watching you and listening to you and being around you every day that your parents did an awesome job. So Chris and Trudy Isbell are your parents, and then Mike and Lynn Jakubik, your parents. And you know, Mike was my kind of go-to guy for parenting when Austin and Adam were growing up. So I feel like I'm very familiar with how you were parented, but I'm also very familiar with how you were parented because I've listened to you talk about it. Mm-hmm. And one thing that you both have in common is that both of you are obviously proud of your parents. And so there is a great relationship here. And with great relationships, there has to have been forgiveness. There has to have been patience on both sides, right?
For sure.
And so I want to ask a few questions to get a conversation going about what you see with your own generation. Now, Emily, as we have famously said here, she is a Gen Z,
yes.
And Matt is a Millennial, though Emily tells us you are just on the cusp.
Yes.
Hey, if I were her, I'd want to claim myself as well.
Oh, man.
Okay,
part of that one.
so you're 19, right?
Yes, I'm 19. Sorry, I had to think about it. I turn 20 next month.
Wow.
I know.
Wow.
I know.
That's going to be big.
I'm excited.
That's going to be big. And Matt, you're 25.
25, yes, sir.
Old
And
man.
26 in September.
Oh, well, you're coming right up too.
Wow.
Okay. Well, so parenting today's generation. You guys are today's generation. And I would like to get into I guess our generation to learn some lessons from what has been done, and so looking at our generation and your take on it. What worked, what didn't, and why, and maybe what you didn't understand that now you do, or what you didn't understand that you still don't.
There's a lot of both.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, good. Well, let me ask this to start it. What do you think? Now, both of you are unmarried, and neither of you have kids.
Correct.
That's with your generation. That's a distinction I have to make now. And so when you look at what you expect to do as parents, and you look at your parents, is there a difference? What's the difference between our generation and what you will do?
Our generation being baby boomers, or
No,
like
my generation is baby boomers. Your generation is
My
Gen Z.
generation. Okay.
So you're not a mom yet.
No.
You're not married yet. You're not a dad yet. You're not married yet. But I know you have to think about it when you see other people with kids.
Right.
And, and there's my kids will never do that. Or when you meet somebody's kids that are awesome, you think, how did that happen? And so what do you see as the difference in a thought process? And that this is going to have two answers. One answer is, what do you think the difference is in your parents and how you will raise your kids? And then what do you think is the difference in your parents and how your generation is ready to raise their kids?
Okay. Matt, Jack, do you want to go first?
That can be a lot of different things, but there's things that I've seen my parents do with me specifically. And I have 3 siblings, and so I know my relationship with my parents is way different than theirs. So, and it's not as much of my parents doing different things with each kid. It's just how I've taken it. So I know, in today's world, kids with phones, getting iPads and things like that when they're very young, that is something that my family didn't do. I remember writing a letter to my parents when I thought I was ready to have a cell phone. And luckily it went well, but I was probably 12, 13 years old around the time. And so now I see kids running around 5 years old with their iPads playing games, and if they're being loud, parents just handing them the iPad and just saying, here, just take this and stop. So, there's things there that I've seen that I'm like, I don't know if I will ever be that type of parent. But as times change, we really never know until we have the kids. But
Right.
but
What about you, Em? What do you think about the cell phone thing?
Oh man,
Or how did your parents think about it?
Well, my parents, it was a lot. In terms of just getting like tablets or iPads or whatever it may be, I really wanted a tablet so bad. And I was probably 10 to 12, somewhere in that range. And I didn't have any electronics like that. And so I wanted one so bad. My parents were like, we're not going to get you an iPad. Okay, so I went and found the closest thing. And it was called like an HP notebook. And it was like this really cheap version of an iPad. And it couldn't even do a lot, but I just wanted it so bad. And so my parents, they told me to make a presentation. And so I made a slideshow presentation, and that was to get Dad. That was my business side, right? And then I made a poster board and painted it and put glitter on it and decorated it and put the title of my presentation on that to get Mom, with the emotional side. And then I dressed up, I put on some glasses, and then I wore like this sequin glittery skirt and tried to be super fancy. And I did this whole entire presentation, and I eventually got.
You were like 12?
Yes.
Okay, and it was at 12 that you made a presentation.
yes, sir.
Oh, how about that?
Some similarities there.
Yes.
You know, I remember telling Austin and Adam, because they were like everybody else, or like you guys, they wanted it when they were 6. They wanted it when they were 7, when they were 8, when they were 9.
Right.
And our answer was it was not an age, because, and I don't think your parents, even though both of you did this at 12, I don't think the age of 12 had anything to do with it either. I think that while neither of my boys made a presentation or anything like that, our answer to them was not a number. It was when you need a cell phone.
Yes, that's
You'll
what
get
I
one.
got. Yes.
Because, you know, generally 10-year-olds are not away from a responsible adult anyway.
Right.
And so the you know, you can want something and not need it. I think that's an element of maturity.
Right.
To understand the difference in what you want and what you need. And so Austin didn't get his until he was 13, and he had a business, and so he needed to have that email capability and to have the texting capability, and so Adam was right there too. So that is curious. What would you say to somebody who, and this obviously includes what your parents said to you. I know that your parents probably had a limit on your television, or they had a boundary.
Right.
There. But I know that neither of your parents forbid television.
No.
Okay. And so what do you say today? What do you think is right for a child today?
I think a limit is still appropriate. You know, you want to teach them balance and
Self-control
and having a life outside of the new technology and the new, the television shows and stuff like that. And especially with things like Netflix, how, you can just watch it for days, and adults do that, But just teaching them, everything's a teaching moment, really. So having television for an hour a day or 30 minutes a day, it just would allow them to mark out schedules and have certain times for certain things. So I think it's definitely appropriate, and that's kind of what my parents taught me. But, of course, and I'm sure you're the same way, we always have those days where if we go to a friend's house or if we're outside of the house, we still, we take advantage of that.
Sure. Right.
But I've always known, and looking back, I've known, I'm happy that they taught me to have different things, different interests, and not just waste the day on the TV.
Right. What about you?
My parents, from what they did with me, I can say that it was kind of an even thing, because what they would do is they wouldn't let us be with the TV alone for a really long time. So if we wanted to watch a bunch of movies that day and it was raining outside and we couldn't play outside, then we would have a family movie day. And, we would all sit inside and make popcorn and make it a family thing. So that was something that we also did. My family, we went through a time where we couldn't really afford too much. And that was a huge one during that time. We ended up just, we would play games on the TV. We had an old Xbox that we just kept on using. And we would rent movies through Redbox whenever that was popular. And it's just, we would turn them into ways to talk about conversations. There's movies that open up conversations there would be movies I wanted to watch that they wouldn't let me watch.
And would they tell you why?
Yes, there would be. I mean, it would open up all sorts of ways that I could communicate with them.
Give us an example.
Well, specifically, I mean, there's lots of different things. I think it depends on the kid. So some of my siblings have gotten to watch more like violent stuff before me because I just didn't like that stuff as much. But I got to watch stuff with, just that might have some language content or something in there a little bit before them, So it just kind of depends on the kid. It doesn't mean that we're ready for it ever, but it means that I think that my parents viewed us as mature enough to handle the concept.
Let me ask you this. But your parents were there. They were on site.
Right.
See, that's very curious to me because your dad told me one time. Now, you haven't met his dad.
No, I haven't.
But his dad is like just a real wise ass.
He sounds.
Yeah, he's
And that's the nice way to put
yeah. And he's like he's the funniest person I know. And so he told me one time, and I have actually used this with clients, but he told me, he said that not allowing anything doesn't work. That not allowing any television. He says, I'll have parents say to me, yeah, at my house we don't even have a TV. We don't watch any TV.
Right.
And your dad said, and I'm thinking, yeah, I know, because when your kid comes to my house, I can't get him away from it.
Right.
And so I thought then that it was important for parents to be there as their kids grew and watch different things because of the language and because of the situations. And when you think about it, do you really want the answers to some serious questions to be given to your children by some sixth grader that's their friend, or do you want to have the opportunity to explain it? And if you're there, I mean, I remember Austin being literally 5 years old. I mean, he was in like a booster seat at the table, and there was a visiting relative who was telling a story, and this relative was not used to being around kids, and this relative was telling the story and just, I guess, forgot Austin was sitting there and just used this word. And Polly and I both, we both jerked, and he didn't even notice. He just kept going. And then later, Austin's sitting there and Austin goes, what was that word? I mean, out of all that talking, that's what he picked out. And
kids know.
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, there's a lot of things. I've also had the opportunity since, I'm young and in a lot of neighborhoods growing up to babysit. And so, I mean, we have our neighborhood in particular has a Facebook page where parents can request babysitters for like certain nights.
Right.
So I still pick up babysitting jobs just for fun. And I've actually developed relationships with some of these families. And so I can see a lot of different forms of parenting that aren't even how my parents parented. And, some you agree with and some you don't, but you can never really say anything because it's all about what the parent wants whenever you're babysitting. And I think that's fair because I'm young and not a parent. But on terms of the technology conversation we were having too, I just recently babysat for a family for the first time, and they do not do TV or tablets. They do reading and outside with their friends all day. Their bedtime's like 8:30, and it's 7 o'clock. They put on their PJs and they can watch their shows, and they know which ones they're allowed to watch, and they can be on their tablet or whatever. And that's kind of how they wind down and chill out a little bit. And then before bed, they read again, and then they go to sleep. So they get about an hour to an hour and a half total. But they don't know the difference. They have a dog, they have friends, they just spend all day outside, and they don't grieve any of that lack of time with the TV because they don't even know what it's like to be in front of it all day.
All right. So at some point in their lives, they're going to know the difference.
Right.
And so how do you explain why this is best?
To your kid?
Yeah.
Man, I mean, it's totally different, I think, how you explain it. I mean, if you just told me the logic behind it, I would think I would be fine. Just how I was as a kid, I responded really well to reasoning, for the most part, unless I had my head really set on something. But, like some of my siblings also respond great to reasoning, but one of us you just got to tell him the rules. And that's how he is, because he's just so strong-willed that's what he needed while he was growing up.
Yeah, like everyone responds
Right, everybody responds differently. I don't think there's one answer, because it's totally different. We have 3 kids, and me and my youngest brother are the exact same, and then the middle child is your stereotypical, totally different from the rest of us.
Right.
But my parents had to parent him totally opposite of me, and there were multiple times whenever I was growing up where I would buck up and be like, why do you treat him differently than me? Why does he get different punishments? And you go easier on him. But the truth is, I wasn't in the room whenever they were actually talking to him. I didn't understand the things that were being said and everything that would prompt them to have a different solution. So,
Right. Are parents and children equal? Should they be equal? I mean, I hear a lot about that today. This is a person, and this is a person that deserves to be, to express themselves so that seems like equality. So how do you guys land on that?
Yeah, I think, like you're saying, equality, everyone's equal, but the kids should know who their elders are and should respect the people that are older than them. So if you go into if I came over for the first time, I'm friends with Austin, and I just walk in and say, Andy, how you doing? And just very casual, that might not go well in your house. But if I walk up and say, Mr. Andrews, nice to meet you, sir. How's it going? That's something that, even though we are equal, we're both humans. We both have, the same rights, everything there. I should still respect the people or where the respect is due, if that makes sense. That's what I believe.
I don't know how I feel about this topic. I think it's because, though, I've seen so many different sides of it. So some people take it to a real extreme, where the kid that is a 3-year-old gets to decide their routine and when they go to bed and when they put their PJs on and all this stuff. And it's just like, they don't even understand how to make the decisions yet, and they're already being given the ability to tell their parents what's okay and not okay, and I don't think I agree with that. So that is how a lot of people now look at the term equal with their kids.
How do you think that turns out long term?
Terribly, because you don't want to raise their grandkids. That's what my dad talked to me about. Whenever I talked to him, he was like, if you take the time to parent now, then you can spoil the grandkids. But if you spoil your kids now, you're raising the grandkids. So, I mean, I think that's a fair point.
I think that's a fair point.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we see that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I really still believe that when you are overly permissive with your kids, and I'm not talking about saying because I said so. I'm big on being able to explain and explaining why. Now, I'm not talking about explaining why to a 3-year-old,
Mm-hmm.
okay? Because a 3-year-old doesn't understand
Right.
why not to run in the street,
Right.
because they can't conceive of anybody, much less themselves, being hit by a car.
Right.
And so they're, I read a lot of history, and one of the people I read is King Solomon. And King Solomon said, discipline your child while he is young, or you will ruin his life. And I've thought about that a lot, because it says discipline while he's young, or you will ruin his life. Not his life will be ruined.
Right.
You will ruin his life. And I think that when we are overly permissive with little kids, we are opening the door for society to discipline. If we don't see, we discipline in order that a child learns self-discipline.
Right.
But a person without self-discipline, they will be disciplined by society.
Right.
And when an adult is disciplined by society, it's never pretty. It's always you're under arrest. You're, here's a restraining order.
Right.
You're
Right.
being sued. It's not a good thing. And so I think what you're both saying is that the equal part is equal parts respect.
Right.
Because I do believe that parents can offend their children. Mm-hmm. And children, because they're kids, can't really do anything about it. And so I think that a lot of angry teenagers turn out that way because they were offended as children, and it happened over and over and over again without anybody acknowledging or saying, I'm so sorry I was wrong, will you forgive me, and pressing that reset button. And so, at the age of a teenager, what may seem to us like an individual event, it may seem to a parent like an individual event, to that teenager who has had that heaped on them event after event after event, that just feels like the way things are. Mm-hmm. And so I really think that respect is at the basis of that, equality, I guess, if you want to say it that way, because both of you meet people very well. I mean, like 10 out of 10. You're top notch. And that first impression is so huge. Mm-hmm. I mean, first impressions are so they're so overwhelming that it's really hard to back up on a first impression. Mm-hmm. And so I think that, how did your parents teach you guys to act?
Well, for me specifically, I know one thing that my parents said, like I always knew, and as a kid, when you mess up.
Yes.
A few times, and I'm sure it wasn't a ton for me because I've had older siblings. I've seen what they've done, the mistakes they've made, and I've seen them get disciplined. And I'm like, don't want that. So I'm like,
you're lucky. I'm the oldest. I never had that luxury.
I had two before me. So,
wow.
But when I did something wrong, I would know. They would take me into the room, give me a spanking. But after that, they wouldn't just leave. They wouldn't just, you messed up, boom, it's over. They would sit down with you while you're crying and calming down and say, this is why I spanked you. I love you. It's not because we wanted to. We hate doing it, but it's to teach you. So I think nowadays, and I'm not generalizing parents, but nowadays parents will discipline their kids and leave it at that. Mm-hmm. Or they'll take away a phone or an Xbox and after a certain amount of time give it back. I think there's different ways to go about that. And so like looking back, I can see my parents, every time I was disciplined, there was a good reason for it. I don't think I was ever falsely disciplined.
Your parents had a unique way of keeping the peace between siblings. If you guys were arguing over a toy, what happened?
I mean, they would always make sure that we were friends and made us remember that we were friends. give each other hugs, talk to both of us, make us remember, or really realize why are we fighting in the first place.
Do you remember your dad taking something if you were fighting on it? Yeah, because I remember Mike saying, if you argue over whose it is, it's mine. Mm-hmm. And I saw Mike lean in one time to you guys going, are you guys arguing over it? No, Dad. No, it's his. It's his.
Yeah. Plenty of times. But it's a good lesson, Mm-hmm. But I've always known that, and that's what I'm trying to say is when I've been disciplined, there's been a good reason behind it, and they've done a good job teaching me why I'm being disciplined.
Right.
Which I think is really important. My parents did the same thing with me. And I think it's the only thing that kept me from being or having that voice in my head that was like, they're just, upset with me and they're mad at me or, blaming myself in ways that I shouldn't that cause more insecurity later. Being a girl, that's a huge thing, especially because, interactions with a father especially can equal that pretty easily. But in terms of meeting people, how we were talking about just a little bit ago, I wouldn't say my parents ever had a conversation with me about how to introduce myself to somebody or meet anybody. I think that's just because I'm a pretty extroverted person, but I also would just watch. So again, everything's a teaching moment that comes with parents' actions as well, inside and outside of the house. And I grew up watching my dad, in business speaking. My mom, she went through sales phase, all these different things, how she addressed just family events, everything. And I learned from both of them when to talk, when not to talk for the most part, and how to walk into a room and talk to somebody. And I think that it doesn't always take a conversation for certain things. Sometimes you're just learning anyways. Mm-hmm. So,
just from them being a good role model.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And you were evidently put in positions to watch.
Right.
That's something that I have thought a lot about. That we three meet people that are your age that don't seem to have the ability to have a conversation. Mm-hmm. And they don't seem to have the ability to smile while they talk or to focus on somebody and look them in the eye. And I've wondered a lot about that. And I've thought about what happened to me when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned a few minutes ago about, handing a kid an iPad and say, here, just go off there. When I was growing up, and I would say your parents too, when we were growing up, there was a desire to become an adult and a desire to be an adult and act like an adult and hear what the adults were saying. And I remember, my parents telling me, you can stay in here and listen to the adults talk as long as you're quiet. But if you call attention to yourself, you're going to bed. Mm-hmm. And so there were many times that I realized they have forgotten I'm here. and I heard my parents, disagree with other people. I heard my parents, I just heard tons of conversations, tons of adult conversations. And now I think the easy way out to say, okay, while we eat in here, I'm going to put on a video and the kids are going to eat in the playroom.
Right.
And they'll watch a movie while or on family trips. I had to learn. I mean, I'm ADD as can be, and I had to learn to be calm on a family trip when there was nothing to do but listen to my parents or talk to my parents or read or sleep.
Right.
And I think that I think that to a great degree, your generation has grown up in cars on family trips with headphones and videos.
Absolutely.
Music and not talking, watching, movies, SpongeBob, learning from them.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. Because it's the same thing as whoever your friends are. Well, it's also now there's more to think about. Like, well, what content are you consuming? That's another thing. And I know that's something that I've learned so much over working here from you just talking about books, because I grew up basically, no offense, but thinking books were boring. So, I've learned a lot.
I kind of did too.
Yeah, it is hard because then I can talk about the educational system all I want to, but that's something that we've talked about on other podcasts. But the thing is that how things are just presented as well. My parents, I feel like, did a very good job of letting me be in the room, like you said, and putting me in those situations. But at the same time, they would have their time with, whoever they were talking to, eating dinner with, whatever. But I feel like, I don't know if this was intentional or not, but they did a pretty good job of also just letting me be a part of the conversation. There were those nights where it was like, you can be in here, but you got to be quiet. We're having dinner or whatever. But then there were also times where it was like, tell them about school.
Sure.
Tell them about what you learned this week. Tell them about your friend,
Yeah. They gave you an opportunity
Right.
to learn how to talk to adults.
Right. And my younger brother, Corey, we've always said that he's a little adult because...
Yeah, he is awesome.
Yes, well, he knew how to talk to adults before... Well, Corey, not Eli, Corey. Corey knew how to talk to adults before he could even talk to, kids his age. And
That was
preferred the adults.
Austin and Adam.
Yes.
Because we never baby talked them, and and we would say, "No, this is why we're deciding this." And here's just the last question. We could talk all day and all night. I think about this, and maybe we ought to revisit some parts of this at some point. But I am curious about what did you learn about adversity from your parents? What are your beliefs now about adversity that you learned by watching your mom and dad?
I might have to take a second on that.
All right, I have an answer right now. That's a whole podcast for me. I can say this. I honestly even wish my dad was here because it's such a cool story. But the market crashed in 2008 or so, and I was 7 years old, so I was old enough to comprehend what was happening without feeling the pain. Is kind of how I like to explain it. So I wasn't actually bearing the weight of all the financial struggle, but I was definitely watching it happen and understanding what it was. And then the conversations that led to later, where they were open with me and talked to me about it, made it even better. So my dad was in construction and real estate whenever we lived in Montgomery, Alabama, until 2008. And then, we filed bankruptcy, but it was crazy because we were making millions of dollars. It was insane. I say we, my dad and my mom. But, to watch that night and day change, and I was very aware of what we had. And so I think that's also another thing, because whenever you're a kid, you notice things, fun things. And whenever they're not there anymore, you notice whenever they're not there anymore. But the way that my parents took that opportunity to explain and to not just be so stressed out of their minds that they couldn't explain to me that something was going on, but they also found a way to explain it in a way where I felt safe, which I feel like is really tricky, and everything like that. But I've learned so much about adversity, that it's not the end of the world. Bankruptcy is not the end of the world, and that you can always get back up, find a new idea, do it again, So
what did you see them do when they were at their lowest? What were they doing?
My mom had never in my lifetime that I could remember had a job. My dad was the only person working in our family. I was an only child at the time, and we had just had Corey. So that's about where we were. And, it was all of a sudden we were picking up, moving. We lived in an RV for a while that was of family members in my aunt's driveway, I believe, just to kind of get a plan and figure out what we were going to do. I was there whenever we were selling all of our furniture, and we like had a second home and got rid of that, and it was just crazy. My parents also told me that they would not spend their money the same way that they did the first time. They were very young whenever they had all of this as well, so I also got to learn how not to spend money in certain things. But I mean, we moved here and we were living in a condo, and my dad started delivering pizza. So I went from visiting construction sites and being with him for business deals to watching him deliver Domino's pizza and like never seeing him. But every single time I did, he took the time to explain what was going on, that he wanted to hang out with us. We were going to go fishing. We were going to, find something to do. I watched my mom coupon for the first time. She had this binder and like laminated coupons and had them organized by restaurant experience, like all this stuff. I had a birthday during all of this where we literally had coupons and envelopes with cute notes that just took us through a whole day of just experiences that we got to do at a very high discounted rate. But that's still one of all of our favorite birthdays we've celebrated outside of all like the fun, extravagant, whatever, any trip we've gone on for a birthday. That one's still one of our favorites that we look back on. And then watching my dad at the same time go from delivering pizza, my mom picked up another job. She was a consultant for a baking company. And then I got to also watch my dad go into insurance, her not have to work that job. And so I got to watch us kind of get pulled out of it, up to him having the business that he does now. So, I mean, it was a lot. And my dad even guest spoke at our old church and kind of explained the whole story. And he got kind of teary-eyed on stage, and I heard it all for the very first time, not from a kid's point of view. And I mean, it was just crazy, and also him being willing to share. That also was so huge for me because it taught me to not be so afraid of being vulnerable with other people who may be dealing with stuff too. So, right. I mean, I got so much out of it.
Well, I know you know this, but your mom and dad are great examples for our society.
Absolutely.
Today. I mean, they are great examples. So, and just, I mean, that is, you should think of your parents as heroes to your family. Mm-hmm. So, Matt, Jack?
Yeah, and just after you saying that, we have very similar stories, Emily and I, and our families and growing up like that, because my family also lost everything, but they went about it. So this is kind of cool. As I was listening, they went about it a different way. I did not know that my family filed for bankruptcy twice. I had no idea until I was older. And I guess you could say I wasn't the best noticer, but we just kind of went through everything. My parents would do things like my dad picked up another job as a bartender, and I thought it was because he liked bartending and he liked talking to people. So we're always like, the kids were like, let's go eat at the bar and let's go get food. And my dad's like, please no. And he would just like get one big appetizer and we would split everything. But like, I had no idea. So they never really sat down and said, hey, we're struggling right now. This is going to be tough, but we're going to get through it. It was more like my parents dealt with it together.
Right.
And that's something that, no matter, how old I get, the person that I end up with, my parents have been great role models for that, because they have always been like, no matter what happens, like if my dad did something and we lost all the money because of it, my mom has always been like, no matter what happens, I'm on your side. I'm not pointing fingers. It's, what do we have to do to get through this? And let's do it. And so that's like the biggest lesson that I've learned through seeing them go through all that. But and as we've gotten older, they've told us everything that's happened and how hard it was, and watching the Diamondback games, hoping they score over 7 runs so we can get free tacos from Taco Bell. And even though, and we did that probably every game. My dad was just waiting. He's like, come on, 7 runs. And like, I just thought he liked tacos, So, but like, there's just so many things that, looking back, I'm like, my parents are incredible. They never once showed that they were defeated. they're just like, we're getting through it. Let's go.
Right.
And so that's taught me a ton.
You know, this is a great place to, I won't say stop, but to pause. Okay. I think, you know, your parents and Austin and Adam's parents were going through that at the same time. And so I got to watch your parents, and your dad was so important to me. And so I have a very special place in my heart for your parents and for just the way things were handled. And so you guys are, you know, we will talk about this more at some point in some venue, because you guys are, I think you're proof of what a parent wants their, you are proof of the kind of adult that your parent wants their kid to turn out to be. Now, you guys are still becoming. I'm still becoming. You know, we're all still learning, and but you guys are so far ahead of many of the people in your generation, and I think it has a great deal to do with how you were raised and who you were raised by. So thank you guys for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I'm Andy Andrews, the professional noticer, harnessing common sense and wisdom to plow through challenges all the way to an answer for you. And I think that'll do it for this week. Get us out of here, Matthew. So, ladies and gentlemen, and to the boys and girls who aspire to become ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of another episode of The Professional Noticer. In a world where common sense has become a superpower, I'm harnessing the tiny bit of mental energy I have for you, seeking wisdom, making observations, and endeavoring to answer tough questions in a way that will empower your family and your business. I'm Andy Andrews. Until next week, goodbye. This episode of The Professional Noticer was produced by Matt Limpert. The Noticer theme written and performed by Sugarcane Jane. Time Out provided by Twinkle and Smoke of Beverly Hills. Additional financial consideration provided by wherebabiescomefrom.edu. Do you have young children? No matter that every parent since Adam and Eve has had to deal with the question, do you suffer anxiety just thinking about what your answer might possibly be? Don't worry, wherebabiescomefrom.edu has you covered, and our answer, advice, is well thought out, unlike the answer that Adam and Eve gave when their oldest son asked the question. Their answer was, well, we have to say it was just as much a surprise to us as it will be for you. At wherebabiescomefrom.edu, we have everything but the truth lined up in a logical way for your effort and comfort. The stork, an owl, ravens, Santa Claus, and from a cabbage. We also have proprietary answers we can't reveal here. Just know they are exotic, believable, and come with pictures. Log on now at wherebabiescomefrom.edu because your kids' friends wouldn't believe the truth anyway.